Hey, Rusty, you're a meatball. You're a dog made entirely of meatballs. Do you know that? Clutch Trucker filmed before a live studio audience. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Clutch Trucker channel again. Clutch Trucker here. If you haven't heard about the new proposed hours of service change rules by the FMCSA, this is big stuff, guys. Big stuff, all right? So I thought I'd kind of break it down for you and let you know what's going on. The FMCSA, of course, is the governing body over the trucking industry as far as creating the hours of service rules and what we have to follow. So now they have officially released their proposed rule-making change for the hours of service for us drivers. And it looks like they actually freaking listened to us. Holy ball! Yeah. Believe it or not, they did. Because we've all been screaming flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. We need flexibility. Because the current only way to stop our 14-hour clock on the current rules is with an 8-hour sleeper berth. That's it. That's our only option. We've got no other option. Good example is this past Monday. I was in Winchester, I started my day in Winchester, Kentucky. Delivered early morning. Was able to show 8 hours off. Drove up to Erlanger, Kentucky. Anyway, to get loaded there. Of course, they ended up taking their sweet time. It only took me an hour and a half to drive there. I showed 15 minutes for loading time, and then was just stuck in their door for the rest of the day. Took them over 4.5 hours. So at that point, I needed to make it to into New Jersey, to the TA in Columbia, New Jersey. So I opted then to go ahead and run a full 8 to do that because, even though after 4.5 hours they finally released me, 3.5 hours more and I'd get everything else back that I hadn't used so far. So that was the way to go, so I could still make my delivery on time for early Wednesday morning. All right, so this is the game we always have to play, right? The way the hours of service rules, the proposed changes to the hours of service rules would have made that much easier on me. And I'll go into that here in just a minute. So first off, just want to let you know they've released their proposed rule-making changes, and I agree with most of them. I would like even a little more flexibility, but we're talking about the federal government. And the fact that they listen to us at all is freaking amazing. And their proposed changes are actually fairly reasonable, in my opinion. And this all came about really because once they put the ELD mandate in last year, they realized that a lot of people weren't making deliveries on time anymore, because now the electronic logs force drivers to follow the actual rules. That's why a lot of people were saying, well, if I have to go from paper to e-logs, it's going to be the end. And as I've always said, and I have another video about hours of service rules where I explained the problem isn't paper log versus e-log, it's the hours of service rules just suck and they don't work right. And they've actually helped to make some changes on that. The fact that I'm on paper, I can go back and fix things and make it look legal when I had to do something different, and I know everybody on paper logs will admit they've done that. We shouldn't have to do that because the rules were bad, at least because everybody was forced to go onto the e-logs, most people that is. I'm one of the few that's not. That made them realize, these aren't working. Now, before I go any further, the first thing I do want to put in here is that the FMCSA and I was put out their initial proposed rule changes, okay? They're not going into effect yet. They're still they've just put out what they've thought they think is best. And then they're still taking comments. So drivers, we still have a chance to comment. This is, it's now the 19th of September, Thursday morning. I'm parked here at a quick fill in Barkeyville, Pennsylvania. By the way, drivers, if you've ever jumped off at Barkeyville, there's the TA right there at the exit. Go a little further up the road to the south, And there's the quick fill. Never fills up. It never does. You can always find a spot here, even though that TA is a freaking cluster mug. Okay, that's a side note. Let me just throw in here now. They're still accepting comments, so you can read what they've done or listen to my video here. And then you can go onto this website. I'm going to put it right down here, okay? That has where you can put in your comments, and they're accepting comments until December 7th. Okay, so you want to make sure you get this done soon, guys, or the window is going to go away. But I'm going to put that address right down here. No point in me trying to say it to you because it's a ridiculously long address. Of course, it's the government. They couldn't just have it as hoscomments.com, which would make a lot of sense. Again, we're talking about the government. All right, so I'm going to put that link right down here. Write it down, guys, and go to that. And please make your comments. Like I'm going to put mine in, saying I would like to see a little bit more flexibility. I'm sure it'll be ignored, but if we don't say anything, then nothing happens. And my wife always says, ask and you get, don't and you won't. So if you shut up and don't say a damn thing, then you can't complain about the rules that are going to come about. If you actually say something, maybe they'll listen, and maybe changes will come about from that. All right, and speaking of those changes, let me now address what they've proposed, and we'll run them down one by one. All right, there's three main big things that are going to be changing if they adopt the rules that they're proposing that are going to affect most of the drivers over the road. Let me just quickly say there are two others that are going to affect a few. Like there's they want to expand those who just drive regionally and do like the 100-hour radius rule. They're going to expand that to 150 hours or 150 miles as their proposal. And the other one that, we hardly ever have to use and probably for the most part don't use is adverse weather conditions. The way it's written now and the way we have to follow it is we can run an extra 2 hours of driving time if we run into adverse weather conditions. However, we still can't go over our current 14-hour clock, which if you're up against your 14 when you run into a traffic jam due to a blizzard, doesn't help you out. You're still screwed against the wall. So they figured that out, and they've added 2 hours to your day. So you can extend your day from 14 to 16 hours if you run into the adverse weather conditions. All right, that's kind of a minor thing. The three other big things are what we're going to address next. Okay, the 30-minute break rule. All right, now this is one that's always kind of chapped my butt. And I'll tell you why. Because the way I was originally doing it on my paper logs is the way it's probably going to be changed to a point. Because they used to say, because they put the rule out there saying, well, we don't want you driving more than 8 hours in a row. That's why they did the 30-minute break required after 8 hours of driving. But the way they wrote the rule initially, they didn't really say that. The rule initially was saying after 8 hours on duty. So if you went on duty at 8 a.m. and did a 15-minute pre-trip, then maybe you took 15 minutes off after that. Well, now maybe you get called back in the office or something if you're at the yard when you started, and now you're off duty for another half hour or 45 minutes. Then you finally get to driving. Well, now you don't get to drive 8 hours because your day started at 8 a.m. You have to take a break before 4 p.m. that day. Well, but what if you've only been driving 6.5 hours, 7 hours? Doesn't matter. The current rule shows you got to take that 30-minute break. All right, I think they screwed up in the wording when they initially put that one in. They've basically fixed that. So now the rule is it's just 30-minute break after 8 hours of consecutive driving. The way it should be. So you don't have to start the 8-hour clock on that for your break coming up, guys, in the new proposed rule until you've actually been driving for 8 hours in a row. And now here's the really great part. This is one thing that always kind of bugged me about that rule, is what if I stop and fuel? I show fueling for 15 minutes, then I go in to go to the bathroom, I get a couple sodas, buy a sandwich, whatever, or make a sandwich in my truck for another 15 minutes after that. I've just spent 30 minutes not driving, but according to the way the rule is now, I still need to spend another 15 minutes off duty to qualify for that 30-minute break. Here is the beautiful thing. They figured that out. We can now claim, well, we will hopefully, if they put this rule in this way, the 30 minutes I spent fueling as a break from driving, which it is. And honestly, guys, when you get out to fuel and get around your truck and do all that, you're getting out of your truck, you're moving around. That's the whole point. They don't want you just continuously driving for more than 8 hours. So now I could do that. I could claim 15 minutes fueling, 15 minutes off duty while I go to the bathroom, read the newspaper, grab a sandwich, whatever. And as long as I had 30 minutes not driving and get back on the road, that would qualify for my 30-minute break. That's a beautiful thing. Wow, they kind of got it on that one. So you can even spend 30 minutes on duty. Maybe you just got loaded at a shipper. And this has happened to me before. You go 15 minutes, 30 minutes down the road to the nearest CAT scale. Well, what if you got to scale it? Now what if you got to adjust and it didn't work the first time and you got to scale like 3 times? That'll take you up to a half hour. Well, you know what? You've killed your half-hour break with the way the new rule is written. That's beautiful. I love it. So, props to that. I'll take that. So that's one huge change they've made, or they're proposing to make, for the 30-minute break. And I think that works, drivers. Okay, next big change they're proposing is they're going to do some changes to the sleeper berth provision. The split sleeper berth. Currently, as it's written now, you can do a split sleeper berth, 8 hours in the sleeper berth, and 2 hours either in the sleeper berth or off duty, or a combination of the two, to qualify for your total of 10 hours off duty, or sleeper berth / off duty, to get your time back. Problem is that rule, because your 14-hour clock still only stops for the 8 hours. That's the only way to stop your 14-hour clock right now, is for 8 hours in the sleeper berth. And many times that really doesn't help you out. About the only way that works is, for my example, like the other day. I drove an hour and a half from Winchester, Kentucky up to Erlanger, Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, to get loaded. Drove an hour and a half, 15 minutes for on-duty time getting loaded. And then I went back to the sleeper berth for 8 hours. So I could, then drive later on that night and make it all the way to New Jersey. Now, I didn't want to have to spend a whole 8 hours in the sleeper berth, according to my log, but that was the only way to stop that clock. If I had gotten driving right after the 4.5 hours they wasted for me at that shipper, I wouldn't have gone as far as I needed to go that night. So pretty much my only option was to wait out extra hours. So I'm loaded, I'm ready, they've released me. Now I got to find a place to hide for another 3.5 hours, because they killed 4.5. Well, okay, so now I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. And by the time I finally get back on the road, well, now this is what my complaint has always been about these hours of service rules. Now I'm having to drive later and longer, and I'm going to be a little more tired than I'd like to be if I didn't have to wait that 8.5 hours. Well, now they're splitting up the sleeper berth. You can do 7 hours. Okay, you have to do at least 7 hours, and then you can do at least 2. It still has to total 10. So, say you do 7 hours in the sleeper berth, then you do at least 3 more, and it totals 10 hours. Here's the great news. The way it's written now, the only thing that stops that clock is 8 hours in the sleeper berth. That's it. There's nothing else. Now, they're going to say that if you do 7 hours in the sleeper berth, and then later do 3 more hours, or if you do the 3 first, or the 7 later, doesn't matter, both of them stop the 14-hour clock. What we've been screaming for, right, drivers? Both of them stop your 14-hour clock. That's why a lot of times doing an 8-2 split never really worked for you. Because if you did the 8 hours off, say you drove 4 or 5 hours before that, well, you don't have that much left. You've only got 6 or 7 hours left. And you still have to do another 2 to get the rest back, and your 14 is still counting down. A lot of times it really just doesn't help you out. You might as well wait out that 10. And that's what happened to a lot of us, right? So you just couldn't make your delivery on time. Now, we have the flexibility of not only going 7 or 8 hours in the sleeper berth, then taking 2 or 3 after that, but both periods stop the 14-hour clock. Wow! They kind of got it, didn't they? It's amazing. And now, kind of related to that, another issue about stopping your clock, they're going to give us one more. Now, the one caveat to the being able to do just the 7 and 3 or 8 and 2 sleeper berth is you still have to get 10 hours after that to get a full reset, okay? And that relates to the next thing, which they're proposing for a change, which I think is freaking phenomenal. How many times, it happens all the time, drivers, you go to a shipper or receiver, and you say you drove a couple hours to get there, and you go in and they hold you up for 4, 5, 6 hours. Meanwhile, your 14-hour clock is tick, 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 ticking away. And you need to drive a certain amount of miles afterwards, or a certain number of hours afterwards, to make it maybe to a delivery, especially if it's one of those overnight ones where they want you to deliver the next morning. And then now there's no way to do it. There's no way to legally do it. Well, that's been changed. Okay, so the proposed change now is, this is going to help you out in this department. You have to spend, you can spend a minimum of, you have to spend at least 30 minutes up to a maximum of 3 hours of sleeper berth or off-duty time, like say you're stuck in a shipper or receiver, and that you can do that once a day, guys, and that'll stop your clock. That'll stop your 14 again. Ha! Everything we've been wanting, right? It'll be nice if we got a little bit more than just those 3 hours. Like my example earlier this week where I got stuck for 4.5 hours at that shipper in Erlanger, Kentucky. Well, at least if the way the new rule is proposed and it goes into effect, I would only have to lose an hour and a half off of my 14-hour clock, because I could claim 3 hours of that to stop that clock. Now, the example that was, I got there in Central Time. That's the way I do my logs. I was on Eastern Time, of course, but I do my logs on Central Time. My appointment was for 1 p.m. Eastern. I got there at right just before 1 p.m., which would be 12 p.m. Central Time. Okay, showed my 15 minutes on duty for loading. Then went on to sleeper berth. Now, I had to wait 8 hours because I still needed to make it to Columbia, New Jersey that night so I can make it to my delivery on Long Island the next morning, the way it was set up, okay? So I had to wait 8 hours. Even though they were done with me after 4.5, I still had to wait 8, because that was the only way to stop that 14. And if I had left after the 4.5, I wouldn't have been able to drive far enough to make my delivery on Wednesday morning. So now the way the new rule goes, as long as I spend at least 30 minutes, up to 3 hours, that will stop the 14. So I could have stopped that 14, and I would have only wasted an hour and a half off of my 14. I still could have made it to Columbia, New Jersey. And I could have made it there by like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning instead of the 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning when I actually made it there, because then I had to sit there and wait. Well, what happens when you're sitting and waiting? Well, I'm already awake. I'm already up for the day. If I try to take a nap now, I won't be able to get up and get going again. So now by the time I have to wait out a few more hours, 3.5 more hours, then actually get on the road, then start driving, well, guess what? Now I'm starting to get tired. This takes that problem away. At least it makes it better. It doesn't take it completely away. I could have gotten going right away. When they released me, And I would have been able to drive, if I started my day, say I started at 10 a.m. that morning in Winchester, I had until 2 p.m. No, I'm sorry, midnight to drive, 14 hours. But if I could add 3 hours to that clock, that would give me till 3 a.m. to drive, which I could have made it to Columbia, New Jersey in that time. But instead, I had to wait out 8 hours off and didn't get there until damn near 7 o'clock in the morning. I was dragging butt when I got there at that point. This helps solve that. Now, it's not perfect. Not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than what we've been dealing with, right, drivers? You can stop that 14-hour clock a few different ways now. Holy crapazoid. They actually listen to us. Now, I would like to see like that. They offered the 7-3-8-2 sleeper berth option now. I would like to see that. Let us do a 6-4, a 5-5. Give us a few more options on that. This is where your comments can make a difference. So I put the address up at the beginning of the video. Put your comments in. Maybe they'll listen to that too. This is just the way they've proposed it as changes for now. But I gotta say, I like all of the changes. They're all helpful and much better than what we've been dealing with. So I think it's not too bad, all right? I love how we can stop the clock a few different ways. And if we get stuck at a shipper or receiver, it takes them 4 hours to unload us. We've only lost 1 hour off of that 14, where before it was all gone. And we were screwed to the wall. And whose fault is it? Ours, the driver. It's always our fault. Now we've got some ways to work around it if this is what they go with. So I think it's pretty good. I'm still going to put my comments in saying I would like even more flexibility, and I think all of you should too. But I think it's a pretty damn good start, and it's a hell of a lot better than everything we've been dealing with. So there you go. How about that? The federal government actually freaking listening to the drivers. This is me being shocked. What do you think? All right. As always, thanks so much for tuning in to the Clutch Trucker channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've got lots of other videos. I've got another video about hours of service. I've got lots of videos about many, many other topics. I think you'll enjoy them. Please check them out. Subscribe, please. Ring the bell. Comment if you would like. I'd love to hear your comments on this, guys. Sniff that magic YouTube fairy dust. As always, clutch out.